Hi, this is Teddy, and today you're listening to Angela Mayfield in Georgia on Two Broads Talking Politics, part of the Demcast Podcast Network.
Are you listening?
Hey everybody, welcome back to Two Broads Talking Politics, part of the Demcast family of podcasts. And joining us today is Angela Mayfield. She is running for the Georgia House of Representatives from District 67. And this is apparently, according to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the sassiest state house race in West Georgia. Welcome, Angela.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm a big fan, and I'm a little bit of a fangirl right now that I'm on a show that I listen to quite a bit. So thank you so much for having me. It feels great to be here.
Well, I'm a huge fan of yours, and I follow you on Twitter, which is like, I am infamous for not liking Twitter. So if I follow someone on Twitter, I don't follow very many people. So I'm very excited to talk to you. But for our listeners who might not know you from Twitter, can you tell us a little bit sort of about your background and who you are and how you came to be running for the State House in Georgia?
I am a retired communications specialist. I worked in nonprofit administration here in Georgia. I worked for some international nonprofit orgs and then moved back kind of domestically. I've worked for state universities here in Georgia. And a couple of years ago, I quit in my 30s. I like to say I retired and became an unpaid family caregiver to, at first, my mother-in-law and later my father, and sort of nursed them both through the ends of their lives, which was a big honor, but also a big responsibility that, unpaid women's labor is kind of the thing that props up a lot of families and a lot of communities and also kind of the American economy in that regard. But I didn't really realize that at the time. I just wanted to be Weezer Boudreaux for the rest of my life and grow tomatoes and just get bitchier as I got older and have a pecan tree. And I was just going to wear overalls and a hat and dig in the dirt for the rest of my life. Like a Southern housewife, just, happy to grow hybrid tea roses and hydrangeas. And I felt good to be out of communications. It felt there at the end, there was just a lot of pressure about messaging. I saw a lot of polarization in things and things that should not have been politicized, things like science. So it got a little bit harder and harder, and I was just happy to kind of retire. And then, in a very Godfather kind of way, just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in. And I don't know how you want to explain it, but I ended up becoming accidentally Twitter famous, which got me into a House district race against an incumbent who has never been challenged, who's my representative here in West Georgia. And it looked like a long shot candidacy for a while, he was an incumbent and unchallenged, and I was a brand new face that nobody knew. I wasn't an operative. Wasn't an attorney. I didn't have connections or a last name that goes really far out here. Just a lady with pink hair who just thought she'd just jump into the race. And then it went from being like a long shot, fingers crossed kind of thing to now it's blown up, and it got really real really quickly. So that kind of leads us up to where we are now, I guess.
And tell us, to sort of put stuff in context, tell us a little bit about your district and what it's like, and what people there do and think, and what sort of people you're looking to represent.
Okay, so you've asked me a very specific question that I'm probably going to answer broadly because I get really emotional about this. Just to give you an idea of where West Douglas and South Paulding counties are in Georgia, if I stood on my roof and I looked to the east, I could see Atlanta, and to the west, I can see the Alabama border. So I am dead in the middle, which is kind of like this perfect Venn diagram overlap of suburban Atlanta, as the exurbs of Atlanta, and also true rural, as you imagine rural to be, rural Georgia. And so Starbucks to my left and goat farms to my right. It's really kind of right there in the middle. And my neighbors are awesome. I love living out here. I just have to say, when I first moved to Georgia about 15 years ago, I lived in town in Atlanta, which is a great fun place. I never thought I would live out in the country. Now at this point, like you would have to drag me in chains to get me out of here. It's absolutely beautiful. It's the start of the Appalachian foothills. Most of the people out here work at, say, the airport or airlines. We're close enough to Hartsfield-Jackson that there's a lot of people who work in the aviation industry and a lot of people who work in the cargo industry. So there's a lot of airline mechanics, and there's a lot of, my dad was an over-the-road trucker, which is how he came to live in Georgia in the first place because of air cargo. So this is it's kind of right in the middle between what you imagine to be, Atlanta, the city within a forest, and then also country Georgia, rolling hills. It's very green. We have the most beautiful sunsets. If there wasn't a coronavirus on, if the Rona doesn't get us all, like I would make a bed up for everybody, and y'all could come over and spend the night and have biscuits, and I could just show you how much I love the place I live. It's kind of right on the banks of the Chattahoochee River, and it's also where both Stranger Things and The Walking Dead are filmed. So I live kind of equidistant between the arcade from Stranger Things and the Texaco from the opening scene of the pilot of The Walking Dead. So we have a lot of film industry out here too. We call that gas station Zombie Gas, just because it sticks. Like that's the local nickname. It's Zombie Gas. So that's where I live. That's my neighborhood. And like I said, I wasn't born here. We have this expression in Georgia, if you were grown here or flown here. And I am flown here, but I spent all of my summers here as a child. I was raised on Florida's Space Coast. And so I never imagined that I would live this far inland. Oh gosh, I'll never live that far away from the ocean. And I certainly never imagined I would live in a National League baseball town, but here I am.
And you came to my attention through Twitter, as I mentioned, because of a pretty epic Twitter conversation in which you talked about how your local paper, the Douglas County Sentinel, tried to do a hit piece on you related to you having used swear words like a year ago on Twitter. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened?
Oh, Lord, they tried it. They should have tried their luck with the lottery, not with me. Like, they should have asked. So I declared my candidacy for the seat maybe 18 months ago. And so I've been on the ballot all this time. It's not been a secret, but there's been no local coverage because, again, like nobody thought I was a viable candidate. And the local newspaper is very supportive of the establishment. So, it didn't surprise me. And I'd worked, kind of hard to get whatever coverage I could. And then our primaries were in June. Our primaries have been moved back, of course, because of the virus, and also welcome to Georgia. It's a giant shit show when it comes to elections. It's just like a blood sport. So our primaries got moved back to June. My opponent and I, neither one we didn't have any competition. So we were both on the ballot, but not against each other. So it was kind of like an exhibition match to kind of judge base support. And this no-name lady came in 751 votes behind a 4-time previously unchallenged incumbent. And they all shit their pants. So sorry, but they did. So then a few days later, I get a few days ago, I guess, or maybe before the newspaper piece came out, I got a DM he slid right into my DMs. I got a DM from the local editor of the local paper. So this paper is really small in the sense that the editor is pretty much the guy who writes it. And then there's a guy who covers high school sports, and that's it. They used to also have kind of a staff writer who did community pieces and stuff. But, again, local news is suffering. So I get this DM from him that said, we'd like to talk to you. We're working on a piece about non-traditional campaigns, plural, like yours, you've created some shock among voters when you use profane language on social media. What do you say to those voters? And I was like, I'm thinking to myself, are you fucking kidding me? In this world, like in the last 3.5 years that we've put up with, anybody still, has pearls to clutch left? And so my response was very simple. It was, yeah, I'm pretty cussy. I speak fluent trucker with a coal mining accent. And so it's a bit colorful, but frankly, to be honest, if you're not paying attention, if 5,500 COVID deaths in the state of Georgia doesn't make you mad enough to chew railroad ties and spit tax, then like something's wrong with you. Like we have different priorities then. And so I wrote this whole piece, which, with a background in communications, basically I wrote an op-ed and gave this guy pull out quotes and everything just because I know it's just him. Like, he's just trying to put a newspaper together. And so at first I was really kind of like, I wanted to work with him. Yeah, like, let's do this. Let's talk issues. And he came back and said, what about your use of the P word? And I thought for a minute and I said, I don't know what P word could he possibly be talking about? Well, I'm my little lady brain clearly can't figure that one out. That's a riddle I can't sort. So I wrote him back and I said, which P word are you talking about? There's a lot of words that start with P. Do you mean president? As in the president recently admitted his fondness for sexually assaulting people by groping them by the genitalia without consent? Or is the P word primary, as in the challenging candidate for House District 67 showed remarkable support in the June primary? Which P word do we mean? And I mean, at that point, it's pretty clearly it's adversarial. So he wrote back and he screenshotted one of my own tweets from like March of 2019 to me where, yes, the P word that I said, do you want me to say the P word that I said, that I typed in my tweet? I said pussy. I said pussy, and he wouldn't type it. He just like sent me a screenshot of it. And actually, let's be very clear. Like we never use pussy as an insult for people. Like we don't call people pussies as though they're weak, because clearly pussies can squeeze out tiny humans. It's dicks that are pretty fragile. So pussies can take it. No, nobody weak is a pussy. You clearly have to be tough as hell to be a pussy. So I don't use it as a descriptor for other people. It's certainly not an insult. I was actually talking about female genitalia, like this is the summer of WAP. I was talking about, wet ass pussy, if you want to say it that way. But so, I mean, of all the things that he picked, and I have said some salty things, but of all the things he picked that, and I thought, surely he's joking. Surely he saw the Access Hollywood tape. Obviously, this has got to be a joke. There's no way. So I wrote him back and I said, he asked if I had any context to add to that tweet. And I said, you know what? I don't have any context to add to a tweet that is 587 days old and is about a word that you won't type in an email or print in the newspaper. We could be talking about a million other things that affect both of us as West Georgians. If I'm elected, I will also be his representative. So he's a potential constituent, and I would like to hear what matters to him. I wanted to have a good, an actual conversation, and I never heard back. It's not the first time I've been ghosted by a dude, but certainly my feelings weren't hurt, but I knew that there was probably going to be, a bit of a hit piece that they were probably going to come out and say this person is unqualified, that, that they would, I thought that they would actually dig and look for something on me, which there's not much you're welcome to waste your time trying, but I've had a pretty boring life. I grow tea roses. So I thought that there would be some interest there, and maybe he might do some, research. And instead, on Saturday morning, and as you and I sit here, it's Friday. So this has been right out a week ago on Saturday morning, I got my newspaper, my Douglas County Sentinel, at my house, and my face was on it above the fold. And it said, "Candidate stands by vulgar tweets." And the article referenced the tweet, but still it said he called it the slang term for female genitalia, as though there's only one, which pussy is like the only one. And I'm like, no. I know for sure you called me a cunt in your office, like under your breath. You know more than one word for female genitalia. For sure you do. Like there's synonyms, and I know you know them. But so he writes this piece, and in the process, he managed to contact a professor of political science at a school that I haven't attended, to get him to weigh in on what kind of person uses language like this. Are they electable or not? And then he also quoted a Baptist pastor at a church that I have never been to, is a man that I have never met, who doesn't know me at all, from Adam's House Cat. And he quoted this guy who called me a lost soul looking for attention. And that flew all over me, and some of it stuck. That particular thing, that pets me backwards. So I figured, it's clearly time. This was a little bit of journalistic malfeasance, and this was not a good faith conversation. And I kept receipts because I keep all the receipts. So I posted all of our exchanges, our back and forth, and just exposed the fact that, he, of all the things he could talk about, he just wanted to talk about pussy. Like that, and not even like actual pussy, he just wanted to talk about the fact that a woman said it in an environment and in a political capacity where these dudes feel 100% entitled to legislate deep in my lady parts, but they won't say them. And they certainly have no comprehension of the biology of how bodies work. So if you can't say it and you don't know how it works, then you certainly don't get to shame me for it. And I refuse to be ashamed. They thought that I would be, embarrassed, but I don't think that they know. I mean, I am my father's daughter. I am impervious to embarrassment. Dare me to eat a bug, I'll eat a bug. You can't embarrass me. And so, by the way, my opponent was a co-sponsor of House Bill 481, which is what, in Georgia is known as the Heartbeat Bill, or the Living Infants something Fairness and Equality Act, which is the most bad faith title of all. So again, this goes back to the legislation deep in my lady parts, and the backlash against that little tiny baby itty bitty newspaper was incandescently magical. I can't even tell you how good it was. It's just I've been floating. I feel like I sprouted wings. My week it's truly been both the best and also weirdest week of my life.
So, obviously this has gotten a ton of national attention, drew people like us to the story, and I'm sure it does not hurt with things like fundraising and volunteers. What's the reaction like within your district? What do you think that, I don't even know if voters are paying attention this far out from the election. But if they are, what is the reaction like? And, you mentioned this is your show in the primary, the number of voters was, it was surprising in a good way. And, so what does this mean for your election, do you think?
So what this means is that, and again, this is what I think people outside of Georgia have to comprehend, is that the South is, first of all, it's not a monolith. And, Southerners, we don't have a monopoly on racism. And I frequently hear people what's wrong with Georgia? You guys keep electing these horrifically terrible people. And I keep wanting to tell them no, our election system, the way our representatives are chosen, has been hamstrung and heavily weighted since Reconstruction. We've been punching uphill, but Georgia itself is remarkably progressive. We're talking, think about the South in terms of labor relations and union development and things like that. co-ops and collectives. This is who we are and have been for years. It's just that we have been poorly represented both in our own legislature and nationally. And everybody's been wrong about us all this time. And so especially this part of the state has never been kind of specifically targeted by Democrats, really. It's kind of always been red. It's never been really focused upon because it was assumed it's red. So, efforts and energies have gone into other parts of the state to flip different districts. So again, we're talking about a guy who has been unopposed on the ballot for 4 times. Nobody had another choice. When you showed them another option, all but 700, a lot of people just chose the other option, which indicates at least that part of my popularity has to do with I'm not him. But since this all came out, the newspaper had to pull down their Facebook page because they were absolutely inundated with comments. And most of them were, thanks for the attention, can't wait to give her money. So the paper got roasted. They got totally just brigaded. And I've suddenly met neighbors that I didn't know before sort of contacted me and went hey, I live off this road down here. And suddenly it felt as though the progressives out here in West Georgia, I don't want to keep saying Georgia, but 67, my neighbors, the progressives finally put their hands up and said yes, I'm one of you. And so it went from being, it went from being a long shot election, a long shot, fingers crossed, hoping for the best, I don't know, she could do it. To suddenly it is a newsworthy upset. And if the turnout is significant enough, if the blue turnout in this corner of Georgia where the Republicans have never put a lot of effort because they didn't have to, and the Democrats have never put a lot of effort because they didn't think it was worthwhile, they didn't think it was winnable. If we get enough turnout here, that could influence how Georgia goes. And Georgia has 16 electoral college votes. And I want you to think about what happens when 16 electoral college votes from Georgia go for Biden rather than Trump. So I'm still having a hard time with that, about how this little tiny baby race might influence, we might have just done something here. So it's suddenly very, very exciting to realize it wasn't just me against the establishment. Turns out this could have far-reaching implications.
I love it. And listeners, remember, it's not just the presidential race and this state house race. There's 2 U.S. Senate races in Georgia this year.
There are 2. There is a store-bought seat warmer whose name I don't like to say, just generally just call her the corn dog stick. Because I just think of a corn dog stick in the mud at the state fair. But so yeah, we have 2 senatorial races up this time. So, we're looking at significant influence in both the Senate, so at the national level, and also flipping our own state house. And what that means then is that Georgia's House would be democratically led and the Senate would remain Republican led. So for the first time, we would have a mixed House. It's never been like that in Georgia history. It's always been Republicans on both sides or Democrats on both sides. And it's literally, when you walk in the building, it's left or right, Senate or House. So it's been either Republicans were in charge of both sides or Dems. And we've never had a mixed session like that, a mixed General Assembly, which of course is what it looks like nationally when you have Pelosi v. McConnell and, et al. So we'll have kind of a baby version of that, but it puts us in a really good place to get rid of that slap-nosed chicken bone, Brian Kemp, who, can I just say, I've never seen anybody cheat so hard to steal a job that he clearly doesn't want to do. He obviously hates being the governor. He just wants to go home and put his muddy boots up and watch the game and pack a dip in his lip. That's all he wants to do. He hates being governor. He worked so hard to steal the race and now he hates what he got. So hopefully, 2022, that puts us in a much better position. So
I want to do something that your local newspaper didn't do, which is give you time to talk about issues. Let's talk a little bit about some issues that are really important to voters as you're talking to them in this election.
oh my gosh, this is my favorite stuff. Like this is the stuff that like totally gets me hype. Okay, let's talk about healthcare in Georgia. Georgia is the most dangerous place in America for a Black woman to give birth. And it has gotten worse in the last 10 years. I'm just going to like let that sit for a second because it makes me ashamed. It makes me personally ashamed, and it makes me ashamed of my state. And I just like I want to yell at everybody like about that. Like, just like, how dare you? How dare us? So a Black mom, a Black parent giving birth is 3 times more likely to die in labor or post-delivery in a hospital, in the same hospital as a white mother giving birth. And there's been plenty of academic research and qualitative and quantitative data about social determinants on health and stuff. The reality is it all comes down to access and racism. We have counties in Georgia that have no OBGYNs at all. The closest hospital to me is, 30 minutes away. The closest trauma hospital to me is almost an hour away. And that itself almost killed me once. And so there's that. There's also, this past session, the legislature failed, and I don't want to say the legislature, let's just go ahead and say the Georgia House Republican Caucus, let's call them by their names, failed to pass, obviously, like a Medicaid expansion, which means they left more than $40 billion in healthcare money on the table over the next 10 years. Imagine for a moment what Georgia's coronavirus response would look like if 600,000 more Georgians had health insurance. So there's that. That's entirely like Sumter County in South Georgia is a little tiny. It's not tiny. It's but it's very rural and it's very sparsely populated and it's extremely flat and kind of dusty. We call it below the gnat line because as soon as you get out of your car there, you're just surrounded by like a cloud of gnats. Like there's something about South Georgia that's very gnat infested, but there's 2 hospitals. There's one hospital system down there that has 2 separate facilities. It's called Phoebe Sumter and Phoebe Putnam. And those hospitals were some of the worst hit with COVID infections and had pretty high mortality rates. They ran out of beds fairly quickly. They ran out of resources fairly quickly early on. I will say that, it has since improved with regard to like PPE and things. That hospital system is the hospital system that serves Jimmy and Rosalind Carter. And to me, Jimmy and Rosalind Carter are an excellent example of who I am here for in Georgia, and that's everybody's mamas and papas. I'm here for the old people and the elderly and the children and the vulnerable people and the mothers, and these people have access to very little health care. And I find that beyond amoral or immoral. I find that I'm not especially religious, but I can't help but say that that's a sin. It's a sin that we let that happen as Georgians. We can do better, and we were taught to do better. We take care of our own people. We mend and we make do, and we should have expanded Medicaid a long time ago. It's an absolute travesty that we haven't. So we're going to do that. We're going to ratify the shit out of the Equal Rights Amendment because it's well past time. How is that older than me? And I have wrinkles, and it doesn't have ratification. What in the world? So we're going to do that and, expand Hope Scholarship. I hate to say it, but I'm not scared to. Corporations can't vote. So I have 100% intentions of raising corporate income taxes. 42% of Georgia's budget comes from personal paycheck income taxes, which is to say that Georgia is living paycheck to paycheck on wage earner paychecks. So they're depending on my paycheck and my neighbor's paychecks. Georgians put $12 billion into the 2019 budget out of their own checks, and corporations, think about what kind of corporations we have in Georgia. That's going to be Coca-Cola. That's Home Depot. That's Georgia Pacific. I'm not scared of y'all. I'll just say your names out loud. That's these big corporations that have put collectively $1 billion. I think it's 1.1 billion in there. So basically, if you want to talk about welfare states, we are holding up corporations. We're doing the hefty lifting ourselves as Georgians. And I think if we're covering 42% of the budget off our own back pockets, then somebody needs to make sure we're getting our money's worth.
Love it. So how can our listeners help your campaign?
So you can find me. Everybody always goes to Facebook, but I should say that I left Facebook. Personally, I left Facebook when my parents showed up there. So it's been about 12 years, but there, very quickly you will find in the following days, there will be a Facebook campaign account. But besides that, you can go to angelaforgeorgia.com, and it doesn't matter if you spell it out, Georgia all spelled out, or GA, it doesn't matter, angelaforgeorgia.com. And, if you want to watch me like shit post about possums and talk about things that are not Georgia politics, you can always find me on Twitter. My handle is much older than my political career, so it predates that. It is Pink Rocktopus, as in an octopus who rocks, Pink Rocktopus. And you can find me there, running my mouth, flapping my gums about, turkey vultures and rebuilding my Chevy V8 and all of the other stuff that makes living here in Georgia amazing. But hopefully, with any luck and with this groundswell of attention and support that I've received, I will see you all under the Gold Dome in January, representing the state that I love so, so, so much. I wish I could just explain to everybody why Georgia is so amazing and how much I love it. Like I give my life for this place. I'll fight tooth and nail. I'll go down fighting for Georgia. So I'm happy to be here.
Well, I really wish I could travel right now because I'm ready to hop on a plane and go knock doors for you. But we've got this pandemic thing going on.
I know, right? It's terrible. But hopefully, if we had a governor who knew, who could tell what the shinola was versus the shit, we could have, kind of kept this in the box a little bit better, I believe. And, but I think, hopefully some good leadership will come through and we'll figure something out. And I refuse to believe that I won't be able to hug people again. So at some point, I'm a hugger. So at some point, hopefully I will see you all in Georgia and give you a great big Southern hug.
Well, as soon as this pandemic lifts enough to travel, I'm coming down to Georgia and I'm going to find all of the progressive women who are going to take over the state house because it's going to happen.
There are so many of us. Like again, it was surprising. There are so many of us. I can't tell you how many great candidates there are running for Georgia State House. I'm not the only one. I'm not an anomaly, which is why it feels so weird to get all this attention. I am surrounded by brilliant women who are about to take our state. It is so fantastic. So I'm so proud to be in the room with them.
Well, Angela, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us today. And thank you for being you.
Thank you. You're two of my very favorite broads who talk politics. So this has been a total honor, and I will come back anytime that you let me. So I sure do appreciate it. And I will keep you updated.
Right, awesome.
Thank you for listening to Two Broads Talking Politics, part of the Demcast Podcast Network. Our theme song is called Are You Listening off of the album Elephant Shaped Trees by the band Immunuri, and we're using it with permission of the band. Our logo and other original artwork is by Matthew Weflin and was created for use by this podcast. You can contact us at twobroadstalkingpolitics@gmail.com or on Twitter or Facebook at Two Broads Talk. You can find all of our episodes at twobroadstalkingpolitics.com or anywhere podcasts are found.